Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we are taking on something really profound. We've got these transcripts from Swami Viditatmananda's talks.
His commentary on the Kenopanishad.
Exactly, a Pasha, very detailed stuff. And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to unpack Swami's teachings on a really critical section. We want to grapple with the fundamental nature of reality.
And what it actually means to know that ultimate reality.
Yes. And fair warning, the core idea that Swami brings out here, it might just challenge your whole idea of what knowledge even is.
And the Kenopanishad itself, it starts right there. It asks about the power, the source behind everything. Why does the mind think?
How do the senses work? What makes the life force move?
Right. It's fundamentally asking about Brahman, the ultimate reality, and how it connects to us, to the individual self.
And Swami's approach, this Vakibhasha, like you said, it's not just a summary. He goes verse by verse, almost word by word.
Really unpacking the subtle meaning.
Hitting deep into the text.
And the goal isn't just, intellectual understanding. It's aimed at realization, a direct knowing.
Leading to what the Upanishad calls amritatvam.
Ultimate freedom,
Yeah.
immortality in that sense.
Okay, all right. Let's dive in then. Let's unpack these teachings and see where Swami guides us. So maybe we should start where Swami often does, the human condition. Where do we typically look for happiness?
Well, almost always we look outside ourselves, don't we? In objects, people, achievements. What the texts call anatma, the non-self.
Right, the external stuff.
And Swami points out, drawing from the Upanishad's context, that this is inherently limited. Why? Because those external things are temporary. They're anicca.
So the happiness we get from them has to be temporary too. It fades, it changes.
Exactly. It's built on a shaky foundation.
Which makes perfect sense logically, but it still feels so hard not to chase those things.
That's the human predicament, isn't it? And the Upanishad contrasts this seeking with the self, the atma,
Which is described how?
as imperishable, akshaya, and crucially, as the very nature of eternal happiness itself, nitya sukha svarupa.
Ah, so it's not that you find happiness in the self.
The self is that happiness. Its very nature.
Okay, now this brings up the whole topic of actions, karma. The sources mention that religious actions, rituals, they can bring results, right? Sometimes pleasant ones, like reaching heaven's Svarga.
Yes, they can produce specific temporary results, even results in other realms like Svarga.
But that's not the final goal here.
Not according to these teachings, no. Swami is clear. While karma yields temporary results, liberation, mukti, amritatvam, that requires knowledge, jnana, knowledge of this self.
But karma still has a role.
A crucial one, yes. Karma done without attachment to results, nishkama karma, that purifies the mind, anakarana shuddhi.
Ah, so it cleans the instrument.
Exactly. It prepares the mind, makes it subtle enough, pure enough, for the knowledge of the self to actually dawn. It prepares the ground.
So purification first, then the deeper inquiry. And that inquiry seems to kick off right with the first verse of the Kenopanishad itself. That big question Swami explores.
The Kena questions.
Right. By whose will does the mind apprehend its objects? Or life force move? Or the tongue utter speech, it's asking. Who or what is running the show inside?
And Swami's interpretation here is fascinating. He argues that the orderly activity, the pravrutti, of our inner faculties, mind, senses, life force.
Manas, indriyas, prana.
Not random. It's coordinated. It's purposeful. And this consistent, orderly functioning points to something conscious directing it.
Okay, so there must be a conscious controller, an atiyata, a chetana.
Precisely. It's an inference. The activity itself, the pravrutti lingam, Swami calls it a sign, a chinha.
Like smoke indicates fire, the functioning indicates a conscious director.
Exactly. And this conscious principle, this chetana, is fundamentally different from the instruments it directs.
How so?
Well, the mind, the senses, the prana, they're considered inert, unconscious in themselves, chetana.
So they don't have their own light, so to speak.
Right. It's the conscious principle, the chetana, that illuminates them, that lends its consciousness. That's what enables knowledge, vijnana, to manifest through the senses. It powers the whole system.
Okay, so our very functioning implies this conscious director. Now, what is this director? This self or Brahman? Swami spends a lot of time on its characteristics. What does he emphasize?
Right. He unpacks several key attributes, things that really set it apart from anything we experience ordinarily. First, it's eternal, nitya, not subject to time, birth, or death.
It wasn't born when the body was born?
Correct. And it's unchanging, nirvikara, or avikari, All the changes, desires, efforts, modifications, they belong to the mind, the instruments.
Not to the self
The
itself.
self remains unchanged.
Hmm. If it's unchanging, how do we even perceive it or know it's there?
Well, that leads to another crucial attribute. It's self-luminous, svayam prakasha, meaning it is the very light of consciousness. It illuminates everything else, our thoughts, the world, feelings. But it doesn't need any other light or means to be known or to exist. It shines by itself.
So it's not like an object we shine a light on. It is the light.
Exactly. It's the fundamental awareness. And related to this, it's often described as attributeless, nirvishe.
Without qualities. But we just listed qualities like eternal conscious.
Good point. Those descriptions, Swami clarifies, are often just indicators, upalokanta.
Yeah.
They point towards it, but don't capture its essence fully, because it's beyond conventional categories and attributes.
Okay. And this seems linked to the idea of limitation, suffering.
Absolutely. The self is fundamentally beyond limitations, beyond any upadhi, and therefore it's infinite, ananta. Swami stresses that our suffering arises precisely because we identify with the limited things, body, mind, thoughts,
We mistake the limited for our true nature.
which is limitless. And perhaps the most challenging concept for many
Uh-huh.
is grasping it as the constant witness,
Basakan.
the witness.
Yeah.
Meaning, it passively observes all the activity, the mind's thoughts, the senses' perceptions, the world changing. It watches it all, but without getting involved or being affected or changed by any of it.
Like the screen on which a movie plays, the screen isn't affected by the drama.
That's a common analogy, yes.
Yeah.
Or like the sun illuminating the world. It enables everything, good and bad, but the sun itself remains untouched.
So it enables everything. It's the basis, but it's not the doer or the experiencer.
Precisely. It's the basis, the efficient cause, the nimitta, providing the consciousness needed for the instruments to function.
Mm.
But it's not the karta, the doer of actions, nor the bhokta, the experiencer of their results.
Mm.
It allows the play, but stays detached.
Wow. Okay. This brings us right to the core of Kenopanishad, Section 2. And this is where, as you said, it gets really interesting and quite paradoxical based on Swami's commentary.
Definitely.
How on earth do you know something that is eternal, unchanging, attributeless, self-luminous, and the very witness of all-knowing? It's not an object out there to be known.
And this is where those famous, almost baffling verses come in. He who thinks he doesn't know it, knows it. He who thinks he knows it not.
Yasya matam, tasya matam, matam yasya navalasa. Yeah. Sounds like a riddle.
And then the seeker's own realization or way of expressing it, I do not think I know it well, nor do I not know it, but I know it.
Na hameni suvedeti no navedeti vedaka. It sounds deliberately confusing. Why describe the knowledge of Brahman this way?
Because, as Swami carefully explains, Brahman isn't known vidita in the ordinary way we know things.
Like knowing a fact or recognizing a person?
Exactly. You cannot objectify the ultimate subject. But importantly, it's also not completely unknown avidita. It's not like something totally irrelevant or beyond any possible grasp.
And it's neither known in the usual sense nor completely unknown.
It's fundamentally different. It transcends that very dichotomy of known object versus unknown object.
Okay, if it's not known like an object, then what is this knowing the Upanishad talks about? How is it known?
The knowing of Brahman is the realization that it is the subjective consciousness itself. It's the direct recognition, the realization that you are that knower, that witness, that self.
Ah. So it's not gaining information about Brahman?
It's realizing Brahman as your own essential nature. It's a totally different kind of knowing, a shift in identity, a realization.
So, okay, if it's not an object we grasp through effort, how does this realization actually happen? What leads to it?
This is where the purification we talked about earlier becomes key. The purified intellect, the Shuddha Buddhi. Swami often points to the phrase pratiboddha Viditatmananda.
Meaning?
It is known when realized in every thought modification. Or it is known as the consciousness that illuminates every state of the mind.
So you realize it as the constant light behind all the changing thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. You recognize the unchanging witness of the changing mental states, the Buddhi Buddhi. The realization isn't about adding knowledge, but about removing something.
Removing what?
Removing ignorance, avidya, and removing the false identification, the adhiropa, with the non-self, the body, the mind, the ego. These veils cover the reality that is already present.
Like cleaning dust off a mirror reveals the reflection that was always possible.
That's a very good analogy. Swami describes it as arriving at a firm conviction, a duha nishkaya.
Not just an idea, but a certainty.
Yes, and it comes not just from thinking about it, but through deep, systematic inquiry, vikara, guided by the scriptural teaching, the agama upadesha,
Received properly.
received properly through a qualified teacher and tradition, the aparampara. It's a whole process.
And the result, the outcome of this profound realization, the texts call it amritatvam, immortality. What does that mean here?
Well, amritatvam here is quite radical. It's not just about living on after the body dies or, going to heaven.
Which are results of karma, as we discussed.
Right. This amritatvam, according to Swami's commentary on the Upanishad, is attained here, iha, in this very life.
Here and now.
It's freedom from death, michu, while living. It happens by transcending that false identification with the perishable body in mind.
The things that do die.
Exactly. By realizing your true nature as the deathless self, you overcome the ignorance that is the root cause of suffering, sukha dukkha, and the whole cycle of birth and death, samsara.
So it's realizing, I am the eternal unchanging self, the witness, Brahman. And in that realization, the illusion of being this limited mortal person subject to suffering, it dissolves.
That's the essence of it. That freedom is potentially available right now.
Wow. So let's try to summarize this for you, the listener. We've really dived deep into Swami Viditatmananda's teachings today, focusing especially on Kenopanishad Section 2 and the ideas leading into it.
We looked at why seeking lasting happiness externally is, well, ultimately a dead end. We contrasted that with the self, the Atma, which is eternal happiness. And we saw the role of selfless action in purifying the mind for deeper inquiry.
Then we identified that conscious principle, the self, or Brahman, implied by our own functioning, describing it as eternal, unchanging, self-luminous, the witness.
The Sakya. And then we really wrestled with that central paradox from Section 2, how this self is known.
Right, not as an object, but through a realization of one's own nature, by removing the ignorance, the false identity.
Leading to amritatvam, immortality, liberation, not as a future event, but as a possibility right here, right now.
This whole inquiry, it really offers a fundamental shift, doesn't it? It challenges our basic assumptions about who we are, what knowing is, what reality is.
It absolutely does. It
Right.
aims to dissolve those false identifications that cause our sense of limitation and suffering.
So here's a thought to maybe leave you with, something to mull over. If our true nature is this eternal, unchanging witness consciousness that illuminates everything, what does that really imply about the fundamental reality, the actual substance of this constantly changing world that we perceive through our limited mind and senses?
A very deep question indeed.
Something to consider. Join us next time as we'll continue this journey by exploring Swami Viditatmananda's insights on the next section of the Kenopanishad, Section 3.